I'm Brian Johnson, and I am inspired by the next generation of leaders, most notably my daughters, Abigail and Sophia.
All right, and welcome to the Lantern Podcast out of Good Cause Productions at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. I'm your host, Ryan Martin, and on this show, we shine a light on stories of personal discovery, transformation, and resilience, and we have got a fantastic guest for you today. He's the president and CEO of On Broadway, Inc., the group that's spearheading the in-progress Green Bay public market. He's also the alderman for the 9th District in the Green Bay City Council and is currently City Council president. He's a graduate of both the University of Wisconsin-Manitowoc and the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a degree in political science. Please welcome Brian Johnson. Nice. What a nice. So first of all, let's start there. What are they up to right now? So I know a little bit from social media, but yeah.
Sure. Well, summer, of course. But my oldest daughter, she is going to be a sophomore at Carroll University. My youngest one's going into sophomore of high school. So just amazing kids. They do such good work and great students. They love dance and competitive dancers.
Nice.
Both in the studio and on their respective dance teams. But yeah, just really inspiring kids.
One, so I'm curious, taking after you and studying political science, or what are their interests?
So my older one, she received early admission into Carroll as to get a master's degree in 5 years in exercise physiology.
Okay.
And then my younger one is still trying to figure it out. She loves math, and I started out as a math major. But we're just trying to, we've talked a lot about the different things you can do with math.
Yep.
And just trying to find the right path for her. She's a sophomore. She has time.
I, too, started out as a math major. My dad was actually a math major who then became an attorney, tax law attorney.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So let's run with that. Tell me a little bit about, so you start as a math major. Was that when you were at UW Marinette or
Manitowoc?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Manitowoc.
But I started out, I was a first generation college student, was going to go to Milwaukee, and it was, a week before move in. I'm like, I should probably figure this stuff out. And of course, that wasn't happening at that point. So I don't know if you ever worked with him, Mike Harity.
Yeah.
So Mike was the counselor at the time at UW Manitowoc, and he sat me down. He's like, let's talk about some options. And he got me enrolled at UW Manitowoc. Turned out to be one of the best decisions I could have ever made.
Okay.
Especially as a first generation college student, to have that attention from PhD professors who really cared about your outcomes. You weren't put into large classrooms with TAs, and graduated in 2 years from there.
Okay.
Stayed another year because I was having so much fun.
Okay.
I joke oftentimes I probably have more credits from a 2-year school than anybody. And then transferred to Madison.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know you to have been a really active college student, right? As you and I have talked about things, like you were really involved. I know in things like student government and student activities. What role do you think that played in kind of where you are now and what you're doing?
Yeah, a tremendous amount. As I mentioned, started as a math major, and really I was good at math, and I finished third semester calculus, and that was as far as you could go in the 2-year system. Okay. So that's when I started taking a lot of history and poli-sci courses with Dr. Carrie Trask and others. And then heavily involved in student government, not only on the local campus, but became involved at the state level as well, and was elected the president of the student government for the 2-year schools, and got really involved with the 4-year schools. And I don't know, you're around sort of that body of politicking, and incredibly impressive what the students did.
Right.
And the things they got involved in, and watching state legislation, and you just become inspired by everything that's going on around you. And you're like, hey, I could do this.
Yeah. So then when you went to Madison, was the goal, first of all, you went, I know you stuck around for 3 years, but did you go straight to Madison after?
After that, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
And my intent at that point was to go to law school.
Okay.
So that's why I chose political science. 50% of the people in Congress have law degrees. And so I'm like, hey, if I'm going to go into politics someday, having a law degree would be useful. But I also liked law, right? It was interesting to me. I was elected vice president of the Pre-Law Society at Madison. And so you get a lot of exposure around different people. And I'll never forget Shirley Abramson, who was the, on the Supreme Court. I don't think she was Chief Justice at the time, but she talked me out of it,
Oh, really?
and in a good way, a healthy
Huh.
way, right? Because she was very challenging with her questions, and why do you want to practice law? And you'd answer, and she would kind of probe at those things, and you start to question maybe if you made the right choice.
Hmm.
And I feel like if someone can poke holes, in your argument of why you want to do something, that's probably a good thing because it means it wasn't that solid to begin with.
Right. So what do you think made it not solid? Like, what was that transition like for you?
Sort of understanding what it meant to be a lawyer,
Okay.
and I, as far as I mean, I took the pre-LSAT and
Mhm.
and did quite well. So I have the brain that's
Mhm.
wired to be an attorney, but it's the day-to-day activity
Mhm.
where you start to realize I'm too much of an extrovert to be an attorney, and
Interesting.
I like to get out there. And while politics at the time was certainly my passion, that
Mhm.
didn't have to mean that you were a lawyer. Well, 50% of people in Congress had a law degree, 50% didn't.
Right.
That's the math coming through. Um,
Nice.
but it's so you start to think, okay, I think there are some other career paths that might be better for me, and I didn't have it figured out at the time, but like most
Mhm.
people, yeah, you just march ahead and you'll figure it out.
Yeah. So you studied political science
hmm
at UW-Madison, and so then what's the first job post,
Yeah, a friend of mine owned a construction company back in my hometown and said,
which is
"Hey,
where, by the way?
Manitowoc."
Manitowoc.
Yep.
So, okay.
Said, "Hey, we could use some help, some of the book work."
Mhm.
I don't know. Okay, right. So moved back home and started learning a lot about running a small business. But that's where I went back to UW Manitowoc and took a managerial accounting course, followed up by a financial
Okay.
accounting course, um, and really got turned on by accounting in a weird way, and I just loved it.
Hmm.
And so ran with their business for a few years. Ultimately, if one of those business owners and myself, we ventured out and started
Mhm.
a business of our own, doing lawn care, landscaping, snow removal. I
Mhm.
was in my early 20s. I had no idea what I was doing. And
Right.
ended up being the sole owner of that business, ran that for 7 years before I sold it. And then took the job at the Greater Green Bay Chamber. And that's how I ended up here.
Okay. So came up to Green Bay and
Yeah,
then moved on that from that eventually to On Broadway. It sounds like, right?
exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
And during that time, UW Manitowoc had actually called me back, and I did about 2 years there as a student activities coordinator
Okay.
on an interim basis,
Okay.
and that was really fun. They because of how involved I was with the campus when I was a student, I was on the foundation board
Mhm.
at the time. I was on the board of visitors. I was
Mhm.
appointed to that, and so really understood the UW system up and
Mhm.
down, and was very interesting to me everything they were doing there. So when
Mhm.
they called me up and said, "Do you want to help students find their way?" Who better than someone who hasn't found their way? So
Nice. Yeah. So, I think it's fair to say that, like, in the community, you have a reputation as, like, a doer, right? Someone who's pretty active in wanting to change the community in positive ways. Um, where do you think that comes from? Because there's obviously someone in your role could s sit and wait, right? Someone and not
Mhm.
necessarily make that progress. So where do you think that comes from?
I think it's a certain level of scrappiness, maybe that we're all raised in different ways, and my grandmother in particular,
Mhm.
I was always very inspired by her. She, we grew up in a very poor family. We didn't have a lot of means, very rough around the edges,
Mhm.
in many ways, and yet my grandma always found a way to get involved in these causes that nobody else could understand or figure out. And
Hmm.
you observe that as a kid,
Yeah.
and you find that to be interesting. And but I think when you grow up in really hard family situations, you have to learn how to survive.
Mhm.
And part of that's being scrappy and being a doer, right? And finding different ways of solving different problems. And sometimes those problems really were like, what am I going to eat today?
Mhm.
And other times it was, what kind of trouble am I going to get into? And then how am I going to get out of it?
Right.
And but I think when you develop that sense early on, it just never leaves you. And so I still have that scrappiness, that curiosity, always wanting to learn and figure out new things and new challenges. It's
Mhm.
just I found a way to channel it in a more productive way now
Mhm.
than maybe when I was struggling as a child.
Right. So one of the things I like to talk about on the show is mentorship, right? And who
hmm
are the people out there? And so far, you've mentioned a bunch of people that you've really informed your thinking. I mean, you talk about your daughters, you talk about Mike Harity, you talk about Shirley Abramson. It sounds like you've really had a lot of different mentors in your life. Is that eh, have we hit the biggies, or is there anyone that you're?
No, I mean I would say I'm oftentimes asked again for those who really understand
Hmm.
the childhood. It was tough,
Hmm.
and And a lot of times, it's the old pull yourself up by the bootstrap mentality. And I think to a certain extent that
Hmm.
that can be relevant. But for the most part, it's not.
Hmm.
And it's because you don't know what you don't know. And when you're trapped in generational poverty, it's you don't know another way. You think that's what life is. And for me, I think the greatest mentor that I had was really started in high school. And I had made some friends that came from
Hmm.
really good upbringings, good families, and they welcomed me into their home as though um, there was nothing different about me.
Right.
And I really remember that and appreciate that because that ultimately led to getting a job at the country club when I was 18. And boy, I always say you want to learn something, stand behind a bar. For a while at a country club, and the conversations you hear from people, and you really start to observe, like, okay, maybe the way that I thought life existed really isn't what it has to be. And so to me, it was really good friends in high school,
Hmm.
parents that welcomed me in, and then leading to this opportunity, this employment opportunity where I ended up working for 11 years.
Hmm.
And started as a lifeguard and then bartended, served, was an assistant manager for a while, cleaned bathrooms
Hmm.
in the off season. And but just being around those people, that really were supportive and said, "Hey, what do you want to do
Hmm.
with your life? And where are you going to go to school? And how can I help?" And these people were just absolutely amazing, but really mentored and showed me another way. So I wouldn't say that I would pinpoint one specific individual,
Right.
but it was this collective group of individuals that really uplifted me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like in some ways you were invited into or got to be part of a community that gave you different ways of sort of thinking about your future than you might have otherwise had. Is that
Absolutely right, because I mean, you just look at its statistics, right? I mean,
Mhm.
most people who are members at a country club are college educated. They're, working in good jobs.
Mhm.
And that's when you start to see, like, wait a minute, I don't have to work for $4 an hour at Burger King. And,
Right.
there's another way here that
Right.
maybe could be a little bit more financially stable in your future.
So let's go back to the beginning for a quick sec because you started this out by talking about how you're inspired by a generation of young people, right?
Hmm.
And we talked a little bit about your daughters, but I think part of what I'm hearing is uh, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a need to really promote and support young people in the same ways you were promoted and supported. Is that fair?
Yeah. And I think inherently I'm going to have a bias, right? And that bias is towards kids who maybe find themselves in difficult situations. Um, when I graduated college, I actually mentored youth as part of a program that mentored at risk youth, right? So the idea was Big Brothers Big Sisters, amazing program. You've got others, around our space that help kids out too. But for me, it was really the kids who were at risk, who had probably been in trouble with the law at some point. And um, because those were the kids I related to, but also I felt like I could maybe help out a little bit by showing them that there are other paths that you can follow. And your destiny, if you will, is not predetermined, and you can make choices that make a better future for yourself. So I had that bias, and I still do. Now that said, I think mentorship is probably one of the greatest tools to combat generational poverty, and I think the more mentorship programs we can invest in, the better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And had a lot of ways, I'm noticing a lot of similarities in our
Mm,
lived experiences so far. Like I also in college worked with at risk youth, and one of the things that I discovered is that there were times for me that it felt really hopeless. That
mhm.
where the challenges were really hard, and so from my experience, it always felt like I need to identify the success stories. Like I need to
Mhm.
find those cases of people who are had this success and really cling to that and as a way of dealing with it. But you're right. So often those success stories, they involve mentors. They involve people who were there for them to help them out.
Yeah, and I think one of the big differences though is recognizing a lot of times those mentors haven't always traveled the same path as you, and that's why I think for me it was always more intriguing to mentor at risk kids, right? Because mentors would come to me and say, "Hey, you need to do X, Y, Z." I'd be like, "Yeah, but I'm trying to eat. I'm trying to find a place to sleep tonight, right?" And you think about even our local public school district here and the challenges that some of our kids face, and I think we want to uplift them. We want college to be a possibility, perhaps for some of them. We want the workforce training, to be a possibility for others. It doesn't matter as long as we can get them on a good path for a bright future. but we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are other challenges going on in their lives that they're going to prioritize. And if we just ignore that, they're never going to get to the other piece.
For the longest time, one of the questions we used to think about in higher ed is school your number one priority versus
Hmm.
something else? And I think that question works when you're not dealing with at risk kids, right? Or
Hmm.
but when you're dealing with the traditional college age student who comes from means, it's a different question. When you're dealing with first generation college students, when you're dealing with, frankly, older returning adult students, college might simply not be
Hmm.
able to be their number one priority. And that's because their number one priority is taking care of their children
Right.
or uh, getting food on their table. And one of the things I think we're really coming around to and better understanding at UW Green Bay is the need to do the need to recognize that and
Hmm.
to build an educational institution that can work with all students.
Yeah. And I think acknowledging, right, that it may not be a priority, but how do you make it the number two or the number
Yes.
three choice?
Yep.
And as you know, to be studious doesn't necessitate or require that you're a typical student, right?
Hmm.
Traditional student that comes in and all they do is go to school full time and they study all night. Sometimes it can be, you know what, like I'm going to go to work. I'm going to maybe feed the kids when I get home. But then I'm going to pick up a book for 30 minutes,
Right.
right? Just doing microdoses
Yep.
it can really help people get on the right path. And I think university like yours has done a phenomenal job with returning students
Yeah.
and non-traditional students to really help them say, you know what, I had some struggles in my late teens, early
Mhm.
20s, but life has changed. And now I can perhaps pursue a different opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Like, we're really proud of that. I think that's something we really excel at.
Yeah.
Let, let's talk a little bit about On Broadway, right? So
Hmm.
how long have you been with On Broadway? Am I right? It's 9 years, something like that?
9 years. Yeah.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right. So 9 years at On Broadway. When you started, what were the goals? What were the things that you really saw
Oh, gosh.
needing On Broadway to do or wanting On Broadway to do?
Yeah. So, I oftentimes joke my tenure on Broadway twice, our
Mhm.
bank account's been down to $1,000. And the first time was when I had been there for about 2 months.
Ah,
And, um, and I remember when I started, the board president had said to me, hey, like, we know, some things are kind of tangled and a little bit messy. Um, I just don't know how tangled and messy they are. And so we really had to spend a lot of time just trying to understand where our foundation was.
mhm.
And it really didn't take that long to figure that piece out. We have amazing businesses, really great property owners. And, so that's where you kind of realize, okay, there's a really strong foundation here in this organization. Leaders prior to me, certainly helped build that brick by brick and very grateful for that. So then you start to identify your weaknesses and your gaps. And for us, it was sustainability. And where do you find the funding to do what you do every single day? And more importantly, if you want to have a bigger future and you want to have a greater impact than what you're doing, how do you grow? That financial sustainability, and so that was the thing that we really focused on for the first couple of years. The second time that we, were down to that $1,000 was, of course, COVID. We were completely dependent on event revenue, and I always said we became economically diversified. However, we were diversified within events, and so that became very problematic. And I think I don't know that anybody was really capable of predicting that, other than maybe a few Hollywood film producers. But it's so that's when we kind of came out of COVID and we said, okay, we need to be not only diversified, but diversified outside of events as well. And we brought on we now have a vice president of development who really goes out and works on that donor engagement piece and not only corporate, but individual philanthropy as well. And so when we started out, it really just became about sustainability. And now we've grown and gosh, we're involved in so many different impact areas. It's really exciting to see the development that we've had.
Yeah, I mean, so many people I think of On Broadway as events because because
It's the
there are.
most visible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, that's you've got the farmers market, you've got the Christmas market, you've
Hmm.
got a lot of those types of things. But there is also a lot more going. I mean, I know because I'm on the board, but there's a
Yeah.
lot more going on than just that. Talk about some of those other initiatives.
Yeah. Well, I think, for us at the time, 9 years ago, right, there's certainly arts organizations in our community. But we really wanted to put a spotlight on the arts within our district, recognizing that when we looked around at other districts that were in that revitalization period. The arts was always the thing that seemed to be the common denominator. And so, we built programs around murals. We installed over 50 murals in the district. We really wanted to elevate original live music. And as part of that, really wanting to make sure that artists were paid. And so that became very critical. We really took a look at, again, when you visit other downtowns and you think about what are the things that are most memorable about them, the streetscape design, whether you're talking about the banners, the trees, the plantings, the benches, the garbage cans, all those things that oftentimes you take for granted are the things that make it a really quaint, desirable district, but also functional. The businesses, making sure that your storefronts are full, that you're helping property developers, come in and redevelop or renovate their properties. But for us, infill development is a big priority because we have infill development. So it's filling in.
Gotcha.
So when you have vacant parking lots scattered all over, a lot of that was created through old policy called minimum parking requirements.
Okay.
So a business would come in, you'd require them to have so many parking stalls. And oftentimes then businesses would buy properties next door to them. They might even tear buildings down just to have a parking lot. And then they all have their independent lots, but then when their customers turn over the lots, it's empty, creates no value. So how do we put buildings on every single vacant lot in the district and build parking solutions that go vertical? So we do that, and of course, just a lot of we've written a lot of grants and provide support directly to our business owners, and really making sure that they have the financial resources, that they have the education, the knowledge, because if they're not successful, it's going to be really difficult for us to be successful.
Yeah. Okay. So I've heard you talk in the past. I never fully understood it, but I've heard you talk about eliminating surface level parking lots.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a phrase I've heard you and Garrett Bader utter a few times.
Yeah. And thankfully the mayor and our development team see the value of that too. Now, you have to be cognizant of the impact that has. And that's why we say you have to have a long-term parking solution in place as well. The reality is cars still dominate our society.
Right.
So to take away all surface level parking but not replace it with something would be a big mistake as well.
Right. Okay. Let's talk. You mentioned the mayor. So you've been alderman for a while now. How many years have you?
7 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's that experience been like? What motivated you to run? I'm guessing it. I mean, it sounds like that was always part of the plan, or
no, it really wasn't.
Oh, really?
Actually, I kind of I put the pause button on a while for on politics, but
okay.
I think the motivation for me was really when the Green Bay Bullfrogs decided that they were not going to build in Green Bay. And I remember the owner had come into my office and said, "Hey, Brian, we really appreciate all the work you've done. We really wanted to play baseball in Green Bay, but we're going to go to Schwabenau later today and hold a press conference to announce that they're going to build a stadium for us." And they did in 30 days for us what Green Bay couldn't complete in 4 years. And, and obviously that now is the site of the shipyard. And that's the southern anchor of the Broadway district. So that's why as an organization, we were involved with working with the Bullfrogs organization. And so that's when I was just frustrated. And I went and I spoke with our board president at the time and said, "What do you think about me running for alder?" I'd been involved with a small group of people that were recruiting individuals to run for public office. And we just wanted quality people. Didn't matter, right? Across the board. And I kind of said to the board president, "How can I ask someone to do something I'm not willing to do myself?" And we talked through that, and he ultimately supported me. I ran against a 40-year incumbent. I mean, you have to work hard, right? We knocked doors and talked with a lot of the residents and tried to paint a different vision. And one that to me previously was very obstructionist and not really interested in progress. And I wanted progress. So, and I won. And, it was a great feeling, but then the work begins.
Right.
And I feel like in 7 years now, I've been the city council president for the past year. We've really made a big difference here in Green Bay. And there's more development going on in the city than any recent memory. There are a lot of different factors that can contribute to that, but I think really good leadership that helps people rather than fights against them is always a recipe for success.
Well, so I'd be remiss, since we're talking about development, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the public market before we finish up. Talk through what inspired that, where you see that going, how it kind of fits into broader plans.
Yeah, I mean, there had always been a group of folks that were talking about it in the past. They were looking more at East Side locations. I was even unaware, that was happening. For me, it had been as I travel and I visit public markets across the world, I was always inspired by these places of community and activity, commerce, and um, every day you walk by that old Fort Square building and you just see how underutilized it was. It was kind of built as an urban mall in the early 80s, 1982, I believe. Never really realized, it didn't fully realize its potential, right? And then it brought in office users that were probably, underutilizing that space. It could have been a lot more activity, especially for something that has such a big footprint in the core of your district. And you just start talking and the dots come together. And I couldn't really look back and say there was this aha epiphany moment. Just kind of all happened eventually. But and now, of course, we're really deep into this process, and it's fully engineered and designed, and just trying to raise final gap of funding that we have there, and hopefully we'll have this thing under construction again real soon. But it's fully demolished on the interior, and we're really excited to see it come to fruition.
Feels like the kind of thing that could really change the the nature of that space, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
bring. I mean, I think about ones I've been to. I've been to. There's two in Milwaukee that I've been to.
hmm
There's one in St. Louis I've been to, and when you're in those spaces, it feels it. Yeah, it's a like you said, it's about community, it's about people coming together in all sorts of good ways.
Well, and all the data and research too, right? That
Mhm.
that we've poured our hearts into.
You mean
is
it's not just my feelings that matter? There's more than that.
Well, it's the math side of me coming out again. But it's really understanding, what does this do for our mission as a downtown organization? And it was really recognizing that it is a magnet for people, and that the average dwell time for a visitor significantly increases, which means people are coming down to the market, but they're also visiting other shops and other restaurants and other stores. And so it was really understanding the trickle down impact that can have for a district.
All right. Well, it is time for us to move on to our three questions. If you are ready, are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So as always, we end every episode with three questions. I guess question number one: who do you hope you're inspiring?
Look, I think it's anybody that maybe finds themselves in a position of sort of despair or hopelessness. They feel lost, futility, and really trying to inspire ambition and confidence. That you're not defined by your circumstance. Every human has dignity and value, and sometimes it's just finding that right path to unlock, that door, and really make sure that you find your purpose in life, because everybody has that opportunity and they have that right. And I think it's incumbent upon us, as society, to really make sure that we're uplifting our fellow citizens so that they can find that path.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. What is a book or movie or song that changed your life that
Okay.
you would like to share with others?
This is the part where I'm not letting you get off.
Okay. Oh,
so-
wow. Uh-oh.
Okay.
You brought gifts.
Sorry
People
if
don't
this
regular-
makes your
No.
podcast go on a minute longer.
You're the first
but-
person to bring gifts, so
Okay.
I'm thrilled.
So I wasn't going to get trapped by one book
Okay.
that changes things. And I'm not going to go into everyone, right?
Okay.
But Rapid Fire,
Okay.
The Changing World Order,
Nice.
Love Economics.
Okay.
I remember reading this on an airplane, and one of my colleagues looked over and she's like, what is all
that
of
looks
these?
dense.
What are all these graphs that you're reading? Economics, love it. First book that really did it for me in economics, Freakonomics.
Nice.
And the reason I love this book is because it gets you to think
Mhm.
differently about presumptions that you might have
Mhm.
around a variety of issues. And
Fun fact, my sister went to high school with one of those two. Yeah.
which one? Do you know?
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's her birthday
Well,
today. by
and it's
the way.
my
I should
favorite
mention that.
podcast. Well, happy birthday
Yeah,
to her.
uh,
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
We'll see if she watches. I'm not sure. I'm not sure she's a regular listener, but just in case.
yeah.
Happy birthday, Elise.
But I love this book because, quite frankly, traditional economists have really debunked a lot of the
Mhm.
theory on us, but I don't care, because it's about the process
Yeah.
and being curious and maybe recognizing that there are alternative outcomes to any issue.
Mhm.
Start with why.
Okay.
I tell my staff this all the time.
Huh.
Explain the why to people, and life will be so much easier. So don't just say, we do XYZ. We do XYZ, and this is why.
Hmm.
And I think that always makes life
Yeah.
so much easier. White fragility.
Yep.
So anytime a book is being talked about in the context of being controversial, or it's nonsense or it's garbage, you're always going to get my attention.
Yeah.
And I love this book because it made me uncomfortable. And I think that's important anytime you're trying to learn. One of my favorites, Walkable City. So this is about how do you create dense, urban, walkable environments that are attractive, that make people want to live and spend time there.
It's so interesting. I just saw, I love the concept of walkable cities, of course. And I just saw, can't remember if it was a thread or a post somewhere that said, I think that one of the reasons why most people are so nostalgic for college is because it was the last time they kind of got to live in a walkable community.
Interesting.
I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't thought about that way, but it's very true. Like,
So hold on to that, because when you're chancellor, we're going to figure out how to get you downtown.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, not the whole campus, right? But
Yep.
5 people you meet in heaven. You have to read fiction.
Yep.
And this one just has very fond memories for me when my girls were little. We read it. This was a very elevated book for them, but we read it together, and we each would read a chapter at a time out loud to each other. And just so it has very nostalgic meaning to me.
I read his other book at the same time my father was
Tuesdays with Morrie.
At the same time my grandfather was dying from Lou Gehrig's disease, which is just a brutal, brutal illness. But
it is.
Yeah, but a really touching story. So
yeah. Well, I'm glad you had that memory, and have that opportunity to connect with him over something meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Factfulness. So this is a wonderful book, because I think oftentimes people say things are worse now than they've ever been, right? It's really easy to say that, but this goes into the research and the data that proves it's not. And again, another good book that uses data to back up why things are not as bad as they seem.
Excellent.
Almost done. The Prince. So Machiavelli wrote this, 16th century, for how to become a prince or a ruler. Really became a gift to Lorenzo de Medici, who is the famous Italian banking family in the 16th century, based out of Florence. And really, kind of the underlying premise is sometimes you have to do good, sometimes you have to be bad to do good.
Okay.
Now, whether you believe that or not, it doesn't matter. This is probably the first real political philosophy book that came around and is still referred to by political science nerds. Second to last, dad jokes.
This is right up my alley.
My daughters bought this for me, so the fact that they know me this well,
very nice.
And I love dad jokes. They're amazing. And the last one, a college textbook.
Oh, wow.
So this is one of my favorites, art. Love to travel, and it is amazing every time I travel, especially when I was in my 20s, I would travel, and then I took this course after, and then I'd be like, oh, I saw that painting. I saw that sculpture. And then you're learning about all these things that you had seen and really didn't know what you were looking at. And so now I reference this book when I travel to learn about or find about, discover things that are where I'm headed to.
Oh, fascinating.
So, but it really got me hooked on art. And the reason I want to do all this is because I think it's really hard to pinpoint one book. As you can see, this is a breadth of topics.
Right.
And that's the way that I love to learn. And I think everybody should spend time to learn about things that, again, where you have gaps, knowledge gaps, or where you're uncomfortable. It just makes you a better student.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's funny. So I spent the morning prepping for a class I'm going to teach in the fall, it's called Applied Learning, and it is about becoming a lifelong learner and all the different strategies and how students can really take over. But so much of what you're describing, one of the things I talk about a lot, so this is my second favorite emotion after anger, is curiosity, and the way that I'm starting to think of as honestly as a super virtue, right? Because I think being a curious person makes you better at everything.
100% agree.
Yeah.
I can't remember the old quote by Albert Einstein. I think it was like, I'm not really a scientist, I'm just curious, or something like that, right?
Something about I've always been intensely curious. I don't remember the exact quote, but yes, exactly. So yeah. All right, last question. What's a piece of advice you'd offer someone who hasn't yet found their way?
You're not lost. And I think you're just an adventurer. You're wandering, you're exploring. Pick up a book, learn about something new, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And eventually you'll learn what that path is that you're meant to be on. But you're not going to do it if you're just complacent. You're only going to do it if you stay curious. And get to learn something new that is the path you just haven't discovered yet.
Thank you for that. That was fantastic, Brian. This has been an extraordinary conversation. I loved learning from you. Where can people find out more about you or about your work, where can they find you on social media? Where can they find out more about the public market, all that stuff?
Sure. Well, social media obviously is always the easiest path, and you can always connect with me there as well. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I'm on all of them.
Okay.
But and same with public market and On Broadway. We'd love to have you follow our channels and follow the progress we're making on those projects.
Absolutely. That is wonderful. If you want to hear more stories of people finding their way, please join our Patreon. You get access to behind the scenes footage, special episodes, personal shout outs, and more. Plus, every dime we raise through the Patreon goes directly to student success initiatives here at UW Green Bay. You can also follow us on social. That's at UWGB Cause. That's UWGBCAHSS. Or follow me at Anger Professor. The Lantern is brought to you by Good Cause Productions at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. The executive producer is me, Ryan Martin, and the production manager is Rachel Sankey. The producer for today's episode is Kayla Hafman, supported by a crew from LiveX. And that music you love so much was arranged by our very own Michelle McQuaid-Dewhurst. Special thanks also to our guest, Brian Johnson. And if you haven't already, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. I'm your host, Ryan Martin. Keep being amazing.